the foreigner who is among you shall rise higher and higher, and you, native Israelite, you shall come down lower and lower. There is a big difference between an immigrant in the Bible versus an invader in the Bible.
There's two sets of rules here, Lewiston. There's rules for Americans and there's rules for New Maine. I will tell you, triad weed is the biggest problem in Maine.
Yeah.
Followed very closely by fraud. But even maybe parallel on that flow chart even is the media being disingenuous with people here in Maine. And the question is, well, why isn't the state police doing anything about it? And you talk to law enforcement and they tell you, yeah, we know what's going on, we know it's all there, but we've been told to stand down. How is that acceptable?
Well, welcome to another episode of the Pastor's Office Podcast. I want to tackle a topic today that when you look in the last few weeks and months, it is a topic that has certainly been a little bit sensational.
It's almost like, remember
it is
back
a little
in there
controversial, and the topic is immigration. You think about ICE, how many businesses in Portland, Maine, Southern Maine, and throughout our nation
are
not even allowing ICE agents to enter into their premises because of how sensationalized and controversial this topic is. So to help add to this discussion here at the Pastor's Office is a good friend, John Featherston.
Not arresting people like me speaking the truth who they feel threatened by.
Man. In the last few minutes just sitting to hear about all the things you've done in your life, I am very happy to know that this is like an expert area of topic for you, because whether you served as a civic servant in Massachusetts or certainly your time even up here in Southern Maine, working with immigration is something that you've done for a long time. Mm-hmm. Why don't you share a little bit about your resume, John?
Well, I got started real early in life, thanks to my father, with Rotary. And being a public servant, learning the value of giving back to your community. And even though that I am a conservative Republican, the most rewarding thing for me has always been able to help people quietly.
Yeah.
With my background in public housing, the thing that has always brought me the most joy is helping that down on the luck senior citizen who needs housing, needs a hand up, not a handout type thing, and you can do it quietly. You can do it with dignity and with respect for somebody, and that's always been kind of my guiding light in public service. Because people say, "Oh, you were a longtime politician from Massachusetts." Yeah, I was in an elected office, but I never perceived myself as a politician, because local politics, you just try to do the right thing by people. You hopefully it doesn't play into a partisan role. Of course, I would always want to look at, balanced budgets and not spend money that we didn't have. But at the end of the day, you should just be looking out for your community and giving back your community and encouraging other people to take pride in their community. And I thoroughly enjoyed that part of my life. And it's been very rewarding for me to give back to communities and teach those values to my friends and to my children.
Yeah.
That there's no greater honor than to serve your community.
Sure, and one of the things that is maybe a massive misnomer, because in the last year you have become very recognizable to any of the audience listeners, not just here in Maine, but throughout national syndicated television, Fox News. You have been able to be on, really exposing for the Maine Wire. So you're one of the investigative journalists for one of the fastest growing up and coming news organizations here in New England. And so doing what you do with the Maine Wire, you and Steve Robinson and others, you guys have really exposed so much of the scandal and corruption, in particular with the home health care. Now, one of the misnomers with that is a lot of that is happening with some of the immigrant population. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, John Featherston and Steve Robinson, the Maine Wire, they hate the immigrant. But when you hear your story, you've given your life to help the immigrant, to help those who maybe are of some sort of subset of culture or class. So that I'm hoping amongst many things that we do in this hour is we can bring clarity to how that couldn't be further from the truth.
No, it couldn't be further from
the truth. Now, our hope here is to look at things through a biblical worldview. And so this topic of immigration, God has a lot to say about whether, depending on the translation, the sojourner, the alien, the immigrant. I want to start by this verse here in Leviticus 19. So this is the law of God. Leviticus 19, verse 33. This is God speaking to his covenant people. He says, "Do not take advantage of foreigners who live amongst you. Treat them like native-born Israelites. Love them as you love yourself. Remember that you yourself were once foreigners in the land of Egypt." The thing that I think many Christians, sadly, they forget is that there is a big difference between an immigrant in the Bible versus an invader in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so when we see, ICE, Immigration Customs and Enforcement, they are not to be a harm to an immigrant. They're seeking to bring justice to an invader. And there is a big difference between the two. But I want to share a little bit about, John, some of the things that, let's say in the last year, working with the Maine Wire, you guys have seen some troubling things happening within certain parts of our population. Last year they said 1.4 million people now make up the state of Maine. So a record, according to the most recent census. And there is a growing, both domestic and foreign immigration population here in the state of Maine. But you guys have really kind of zeroed in at the Maine Wire on some illegal activity that is happening, and it is certainly within a subset of the culture in Lewiston. Why don't you share about some of that and what you're seeing?
Most of our investigative reporting has been focused around what they call Maine Care, or nationally it's Medicare. There has been an explosion under the Mills administration, certainly the last 8 years in Maine, because Governor Mills made it a priority to expand Maine Care to people and to get people on the rolls of Maine Care. And it sounds good, right? Everybody gets insurance and everybody's covered, and it's good. But in Maine, the checks and balances of Maine Care are so behind the times that Maine is a pay first, chase later type state. Yeah. So certain populations in Maine have figured out, wait a minute, so I can, maybe misbill, maybe overbill, maybe mistakenly bill millions of dollars to the Maine Care system for two and a half years before anybody even finds out. And when somebody does eventually find out, it's not like you get shut down. They just put you back on a payment plan and say, hey, you're going to repay X amount every month. But in that same time, you can close up your business, maybe put it in the name of your spouse, take your name out of it, put it in your spouse's name, and just keep rolling. And then that clock resets for another 2.5 years. So when people hear, Maine Care fraud from the Maine Wire here, we're talking almost $1 billion at this point over the last 8 years, just in misbilling. And some people say, well, is it fraud if it's allowed? And that's, the chicken or the egg theory, because if you're misbilling purposely, I would tell you that's fraud.
Right.
If you're misbilling because it was a clerical error, then no, it's not misbilling, but it's still yours and my taxpayer dollars that are not being used effectively.
Yeah.
And it's been proven that most of these, healthcare communities that have had this massive growth that doesn't make sense on paper have been from the Somali community or the Rwanda community, especially here in Portland. That you had a very large healthcare provider called Paradise. Mm-hmm. They were billing mind-boggling numbers, and finally the state caught up to them, and the Maine Wire caught up to them, and now magically they're out of business. The most popular one here in Maine has been Gateway Community Services, which has a Portland office and a Lewiston office. And when you dig a little bit deeper, the son of a very powerful Maine senator, Senator Doosan's son, Mike Davis, ran Gateway Communities. So there's the political connection there. But if you dig a little bit deeper, on the board there was Decca DeLocke, a state rep from South Portland, and a Portland state rep by the name of Youssef, all kind of intertwined with this Gateway Community scandal. And it all ties back to Janet Mills. Janet Mills plays and kind of looks the other way because she needs these non-government organizations to kind of like funnel her, campaigns, keep her powerful. If I need somebody to hold signs for me or hold a fundraiser for me, there's all these connections that go back to it. So the Democrats have looked the other way with fraud here, and it's not a partisan issue. It's not an attack on them. It's just proven facts that the Democrats have allowed Maine Care fraud to go unchecked in the state for many, many years. And oftentimes people come back and say, well, the Maine Wire is targeting the Somali community. No, we're not targeting the Somali community.
If it was the Irish Catholic, if it was the Chinese, you're targeting corruption.
Corruption and fraud.
Exactly. Now, so you've had the privilege, both you and Steve, you guys, especially a few months ago, what was it? It was the Operation Catch of the Day, right? So that was the Department of Homeland Security and specifically the Department of ICE that were coming here in the state of Maine in January of this year, 2026. And they said, hey, we're coming after, as we have throughout other states, we're coming after criminal, illegal immigrants. And you've had the opportunity of riding around a handful of times. I've seen some of the live reporting, and because it is my friendship with you, with some of the higher ups within the Department of Homeland Security and some of these ICE agents, share about some of the things that you have seen. And some, for instance, there was an arrest, just yesterday, even still with some violent criminals. Share some of the things that are happening here in Maine by those who make up not the immigrant, but more so the invader category, those who don't have a right to legally be here.
The Maine Wire was the only Maine media group that had the privilege and honor to be embedded with ICE on these ride-arounds. So we got to sit and spend, hours in a car with ICE agents, got to know them as people, got to know their family stories, got to know them. And they were here to target, the worst of the worst, get the worst of the worst off the streets, target people under illegal immigration, have overstayed their visas, had a domestic crime, along with their visas being overdone. And the narrative here in Portland, the narrative in Lewiston is that they were disappearing people. Well, I can tell you flat out, having been in the ICE office, having ridden with these agents, they had a plan, they had a list, they had they knew who they were looking for.
Yes.
They weren't grabbing people off the streets, they weren't going to schools and grabbing school children off. It was all a targeted plan, very, checks and balance plan. And if you believed, the liberal media here, the Portland Press Herald or the Bangor Daily News, that, ICE was just, terrorizing neighborhoods, they weren't.
Yeah.
The most dangerous thing that I personally saw was the protesters going after the ICE agents. That was dangerous.
And this isn't just theoretical or hypothetical. I shared this with you before we were on camera. There's a dear family in our church fellowship here who, while the father who serves in this law enforcement role, while he was away doing training, his wife and teenage daughters were subject to this type of lunacy, where protesters, those bad actors, were following home and threatening families. And it goes back to certainly the media is complicit. Mm-hmm. The media is ramping up this type of anti-law enforcement rhetoric, and then sadly there's even state politicians who are ramping up this type of rhetoric. So, when you look at the definition of invader, we're talking about those who are illegal, the same way that we appreciate borders. The Bible talks about God pre-appoints our times and the boundaries of our dwelling. God is the God of boundaries. He's the God of nation states. There's a whole book of the Bible, the book of Nehemiah, devoted to the building of the wall surrounding Jerusalem. So God's into that. So the same way that John and Travis, we appreciate that, hey, we have a boundary called our home, and if someone comes in unwelcome, they're an invader. And I like to call the law enforcement and say someone who's unwelcomed has been intruding. The same way that ICE is, hey, we're going after not those who are legally allowed to be here, but those who are not, the invader. But as you look at those who cause these types of crimes, I do think that a lot of the reporting that you're dealing with is, again, that one subset of what we're looking at with the Somali population. Mm-hmm. Now, it's interesting, Lewiston, the second largest town in Maine, about 36,000 people within its city center. Small mill town, truthfully, compared to the rest of the nation. Mm-hmm. But Lewiston had about 3,000 Somali refugees in the 1990s when the Somali crisis was happening. But legal. They were given, granted citizenship to be here. Would you say in your reporting that those 3,000, because of the open border policy from 2021 to 2025 under Joe Biden, I would assume 3,000 who are here legally have also attracted a lot more who were illegal, and that group has grown. And now what you're seeing, whether it's the scandal, the corruption, we're going to in a little bit get into even suspected sex trafficking, mm-hmm. drug, all sorts of illegal activity. A lot of your guys' information and your journalism is again aimed right towards a certain set of cultural beliefs that are happening right in Lewiston. Share about what you guys are seeing there currently.
It's stunning when you spend time in Lewiston to see teenage boys walking with firearms in their belt buckles, walking up and down the street. You see open air drug dealing in the middle of the streets. You see tremendous amount of litter, needles on the ground, and you see bullet holes in buildings and apartments, and you just kind of take a step back and go, what is going on here? And where is city leadership on this? Yeah. And it's one man's opinion based on, doing tremendous amount of reporting. There's two sets of rules in Lewiston. There's rules for Americans and there's rules for New Mainers. And once again, just one man's opinion. It's
define New Mainers. I want you to define that for a moment.
New Mainers being, people that, possibly from Somalia, from Rwanda,
okay,
that have come here under the Joe Biden plan when Joe Biden opened up the borders under his administration. People, coming to Maine,
okay,
and aren't French Canadian, aren't the typical Mainer. Maine is been small population.
Sure.
French Canadian. Lewiston is a French Canadian built town. It was a mill town, and so you have the New Mainers coming, and it's like there's a separate set of rules. And just last week I approached the mayor of Lewiston, Carl Schelin, and Senate candidate Graham Plattner,
yes,
literally on the street of Lewiston, and said, "Hey, there were 4 gun shootings in Lewiston today. Do you have a comment?" A softball question to any politician.
Scampered away. I saw that.
Scampered away.
Yeah.
Like any politician would be like, "Oh, this is horrible. This is wrong. This is serious. We have to take this serious."
Mm-hmm.
Scampered away. How can that be in 2026 that the mayor and a man who wants to be your next United States Senator not even say, "This is wrong, this is terrible," or even the simple political line, "Hey, we're still under investigation, we'll release a press release." Instead, the visual is duck and cover, duck and cover. Now, how can that be?
Well, it's interesting because, again, I made mention that they just, February of this year, local news stations were saying that Maine has got the highest population rate she's seen in a long, long time, 1.4 million people. Only about 56 to 58,000 of the 1.4 million are what we call foreign immigrants. So it's a small group of people. 20%, 1 in 5 of that 56,000 are Canadians. So then you get much smaller, down to whether it's from parts of Africa, including Somalia. So it's a very, very, very small minority group of Mainers. I like this term you're saying, these new Mainers are bringing in a new culture, mm-hmm, and it's very sinister. Things that you guys are seeing. I know that you and Steve Robinson and at the Maine Wire, your team has really been focusing even specifically on a few geographic locations in Lewiston, because with the new Mainers comes new philosophies, new religions. And we'll kind of circle back at the end of our time together, but this includes Islam, this includes the mosque. Why are all these young people showing up with $100 bills, guns in their waistband, Mercedes and BMWs pulling into the parking lot? It just screams like illegal activity. And you and the team at the Maine Wire, you're saying, hey, we think common sense Mainers and citizens here of this state should have their eyes open to what is happening. I want to make mention of this verse that in Deuteronomy chapter 28, God does something very fascinating in the Old Testament, speaking to Moses, and before the children of Israel inherit the land of milk and honey, the land of Canaan, the promised land. Moses, in his final address, which is the book of Deuteronomy, before Joshua takes up the baton and leads them into the land, God is speaking through Moses and gives a set of promises of blessing and the warning of woe. Hey, if you obey me, if you do what is right, here are the blessings. Those are about 14 verses in Deuteronomy 28. The remainder of the nearly 60 verses of Deuteronomy 28 is, but if you don't, then you get these warnings. Part of the warnings, it says in Deuteronomy 28, verse 43, he says, the alien or the foreigner who is among you shall rise higher and higher, and you, native Israelite, you shall come down lower and lower. And so, similar to what we're seeing, how does this tiny minority group of people, how are we seeing, you just said almost $1 billion of corruption. That's a massive part of our entire state budget. Mm-hmm. And yet it is being scandalously used. So this is pretty shocking stuff to consider. So immigration and violating or illegal immigration, this is impacting everyday Mainers in our wallets. Not to mention this, the city streets aren't safe as they once were. So share some more things about what you guys are seeing and what you're uncovering.
It's funny because people say, oh, even President Trump, the Somalis and this and if you do the investigative reporting, is it wrong for somebody to take advantage of the system and not be held accountable? Because is that fraud if they don't know that they do? And I do believe that most of them do know that it's wrong, but they're allowed to get away with it. So is it that community that is bad? Or is it actually Augusta that's bad? And what is the bigger plan? And why is the desire there to overlook all of this? And one man's opinion once again, the reason that the Augusta and the Democrats are overlooking at this, because they want to build and keep their power base by doing this. By doing this, they'll bring new people to their voting rolls. They'll make them dependent on the government, because then they can come to it and say, hey, if you don't do what we say you're going to do, we're going to shut this down. So they make them dependent on it. And that's part of their plan. And to me, there's nothing more sinister than that.
Yeah.
You're allowing people to be unethical, commit fraud, but then you're holding it over their head saying that we're going to take that away from you. And it was stunning to me earlier this year, and even Elon Musk picked up on it, and Elon Musk actually even retweeted it. There was a man by the name of Mohammed who actually went to a Lewiston City Council meeting and stood up at the podium and kind of beat the City Council and said, you're not doing what we elected you to do. Yeah. You're not supporting our community. You're not doing what we said we were going to do. And if you don't do what you say you were going to do, we're going to vote against you. It's essentially saying, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to vote for the Republicans.
Yeah.
And kind of put the city council on blast to remind, who's in charge here? We're in charge. We decide, if you keep your power or not. And it was kind of a stunning moment.
Yeah.
Because, some people have said that, and I said it earlier, that there's two sets of rules. And the thing that has always made America great is that people came here to assimilate and live the American dream. Right now, there's a speed bump in the road, and that's not happening.
I would agree. And listen, if we're going to talk about ethics or morality, code of conduct, we believe that there is a transcendent source of that. So, for instance, John, I know you're a man of faith. You grew up in the Catholic Church. You've been married 40 years. You're a family man. There's a transcendent set of values which are derived from the scriptures, as the Catholic faith would teach, as an evangelical Protestant Bible teaching pastor would teach. We have this in common. But if you throw that to the wayside, and similar to what was said in Deuteronomy 28, verse 43, when an outsider who doesn't have that shared transcendent belief, or has a very different, so if we're talking about, not the Bible, but maybe it's the Quran, maybe and we shared about this, where it's the religion of peace. But yet, when you look at someone who's been radicalized by Islam, peace isn't what a radical Muslim is doing. Usually it's the antithesis of that. When we say a radical Muslim, it's usually someone who's done like a suicide bombing or something like that, while a radicalized Christian should be building orphanages and hospitals. There's the religion of peace. So you have these two very opposed sources that are transcendent belief systems, whether you're talking about Islam or Christianity, Catholicism. So when you start seeing that this subset of, whether they're legal or illegal, who are coming into, let's say, Maine, and now they're in school boards, city councils, that's when all of a sudden a small group of people are now going to start impacting large masses of people that go all the way up to Augusta. So again, this is something that is very insidious that we're beginning to see take place here. And it's very, very interesting. You guys have said from the Maine Wire that you're now beginning to see that there is some illegal activity, specifically about some of the mosques in Lewiston, that you have been picking up on as an investigative journalist.
There's been some concerning things.
Can you share about that?
Well, the first thing that got on my radar was last year, before the holidays, there was a report of a missing nonverbal girl who went missing for 6 hours.
Yeah.
She was supposed to go to a special needs school in Augusta, But she ended up in Lewiston at the mosque, a non-verbal speaking girl. And why, of all places, would a bus driver end up at a mosque in Lewiston on Bartlett Street?
Especially when you're supposed to take this child to a doctor's appointment.
To her special needs school in Augusta.
Yeah.
To her special needs school in Augusta. So this student was missing for 6 hours before the transportation company actually shut it down. And I said to myself, why, of all places, would they end up there? Nonverbal student. You know, and I reached out to the state police, I reached out to the sheriff's office, open investigation, we can't comment on it. And then right after the first of the year, another reported incident of another student gone missing, and it shows up at the same location. Makes you start to think, what's going on? So Steve Robinson and I actually go to the mosque in the middle of the day, and I just find one person in there with the school-age children, and like, hey, what are you doing in here? What are you doing in here? So your radar goes up as an investigative reporter, like, what is going on here?
And gangs and
then
psychos.
I hear reports, from neighbors and
they all have a piece in
business
each
owners
one.
that
Chinese
there's activity in this
grow
place
up,
at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Muslim people
You
associated
see
to the mosque
YouTube
with some of the
videos being
fraud and
made
abuse
with
going on. And then you see how
Tesla
they
trucks and rappers.
throw stones and
You
cast
see,
those people
people
under the
flashing
bus when
$100
people start
bills
to ask
at
questions.
me at the mosque, and
Yeah, they
nothing that,
almost open the
like,
door for them
has
to
been
have to
proven, but-
commit crimes or sell drugs
you
or
run a
commit
chapel.
fraud
Would
to
would
keep
you
it
allow any
going.
of this to
Of course
And
not.
then they're the ones
and,
that get
I
looked
grew
at,
up in
like
the
we've
Catholic
been
Church,
watching.
Jesuit educated. Nobody's taking their car and making a rap video
Yeah.
at a Catholic church, and you have these beautiful churches in Lewiston, that are just, like they don't even build them like this anymore. You don't see that type of activity. And when you do go to these places of worship, you're welcomed. You're not shunned. You're not pushed out the door. Like, what are you doing in here? You can't come in here. So that it just immediately,
Kiss me, I'm
common
Irish.
sense says, this place isn't what they say this place is.
I mean, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, probably a duck. And
Probably
you're
a
thinking,
duck.
There's something nefarious happening at
Right.
these places of worship. 76% of the immigrant population in the state of Maine, 76% are between three
Yeah, it often
population
comes a lot
centers:
of the-
Bangor, Lewiston,
Just,
and
the
Portland.
ties to
Portland has a very high
people
11%
getting a lot of the
of Portland's
funding who
population
don't
are
even go to
immigrants.
those places.
You're seeing something
They're
similar
at
here.
home behind closed
I've
doors,
seen some
like
reporting
you
you
see
guys
in
are doing
some
some
of
of
the
the
situations
downtown
here
bus
in
stop stations.
Augusta.
And, whether it's the needles, the drugs, the home health care crux.
Right, some of the stuff that
and-
we've
and
been
certainly as
talking about
some of
with those
these
things back 2008,
immigrants are now
9,
getting
10,
areas
No
of
Child Left
city
Behind grants that
counselor
they did with a lot of
positions
that.
in school
How it's
boards.
all kind of
How are
intertwined
you
with
seeing
people who would be
Portland, Maine is being
susceptible
impacted by this
to
this
those
topic of
kind of
immigration?
disabilities
I mean,
or neurological
How
damage.
is this irrelevant to a Mainer today? How do we need to be informed
Yeah.
as to what's happening?
That's a
Yes,
loaded
yes,
question.
yeah.
And
Oh, cool.
let me just back up a half
Yeah.
a step. As an investigative reporter, I believe there's 3 sides to every story. Yours, mine, and the truth.
Yeah.
And that's a core value of mine. I have reached out to, the Somali community, especially in Lewiston, and said, sit down with me. Okay, don't judge me because, I look like Mike Pence. Don't judge me because I'm an old white man and, and you can't be any whiter with my white skin and my white
Right,
hair.
see how where
You're
a
gonna
lot
find
of the
that
Chinese,
I will always be
Chinese
fair.
grow up
I might not
operating
agree with you, but
that
I will look you in the eye, shake your hand, and thank you for the
criminal
conversation.
American
I don't agree with
slugs
you,
and
but I'll
sluts,
report
they
everything that
switch
you
it
said.
to
And
the
I can't
polar
tell you how many
opposite.
times I've reached out
Look
to
in those
people
areas,
in the leadership
like
community
Amish,
of,
what could be more
of Lewiston.
polarizing
Just
to-
sit down with me. Let's have a community conversation. And I actually
Now think
went to a
about that. You
community
can see.
conversation
We're not. It's
in
not as
Lewiston
though we're
and tried
making
to
it
have
up.
a
You can
sit down
see
with
it.
city
Right, looking
council
back in
members and,
2006 out in
people in the Somali
Whitefield,
community.
okay?
Nobody
None
wanted
of
to
the
talk to
Chinese
me.
grow-ups,
Steve has
fentanyl,
invited
and things that are being
multiple,
busted.
people from the
For the
Somali community to come on
2006,
Mainwire TV or his podcast.
all of a sudden,
Nobody wants to do
after
it.
our
So
home got burnt down in a fire, I was diagnosed
I'm
with chronic
being
Lyme
judged
disease.
by the
My
way I look,
son gets
by my
autism after they were
age.
warned
I
about
think
the
people are making gross
vaccines.
assumptions with
And they
me,
want to
but I
cry
think they would
out
be
that it's all
pleasantly
crazy
surprised
and they're
if they sat down
charlatans.
and said, "Hey,
Then all of
listen,
a sudden,
tell me your side
look
of the
at
story."
then the
Because
Amish
people
community
don't
that was
understand.
never out
People
there.
don't understand why
All
the
of a
perception of
sudden,
fraud. People don't understand the
it's this
crime. They don't
right, when you
understand,
look at it.
What's going on. But people want to know, and I think there's
No,
no
it
better
wasn't.
way to is like
Dude, no, it wasn't like that. Then they put up the signs with the Amish horse crossing, and people started complaining about the horses pooping in front of their driveways. So then they had to pass laws about them putting diapers on the frickin' horses if they were going to be using it like vehicles.
Are huge.
Yeah, that was not out there before that. I mean, people might ride their horses up and down the road once in a while on a ride.
Even though
not with covered wagons and bonnets looking like the Amish people. When you see it, the fucking people are sick and you need help. Yeah, so hopefully the proper authorities here in Augusta, Maine do what they're supposed to do to help these children. Yeah, the child and animal pornography and abuse they make, that's heavily connected.
Not a big apartment.
When you see it, why it gets connected to those kind of races, Chinese, Muslim, mosques, how they take advantage of the immigrants and the funding. Right, and then those places that have so many people that depend and go to those places just for whatever, like a church or a community center, just to,
because he's got a year in the school committee.
Yeah, whatever it is.
He uses that same address, 210 Blake Street, as his place of
I
residence.
know too. I can imagine that would be something that might be
because
knowing.
of the federal drug raid, the building became condemned because there was so much.
The number of immigrants and things that we have, that those things are going to exist.
You couldn't even be living there. It was a condemned address.
They're multifunctional. It doesn't. It's not as though it's just a place of prayer.
Some people say that's a lie. Some people say that it's a misrepresentation. But the bottom line is he didn't.
Right. Over the years here, churches are well known to be used as charitable organizations.
So he runs for office and
do events. Remember when we were kids, St. Augustine, we used to go on the escapade trips down to Portland. We'd have the donut parties.
I'm sure if it was you or myself, they would have said, that's not a valid address.
Yeah, most churches do that. They work with homeless groups. If people are in need, they need food. People step up and help. And then over the years, those places just get bombarded. Non-stop druggies. Looking for $15, $20. No, I can't help you. We got bread and clothes. And no, you don't want that.
He's now been indicted on gun charges. He still wants to be a city councilor. You would think that the city council.
Right, so that's why there are state programs. So if somebody is in that kind of position, where it's not like, hey, they're just in it. Because remember they said the Bread of Life kitchen? If somebody was in a tight spot, having a hard time getting through the end of the month, I'd come in with their kids.
And listen, just because I know
you'd give them a box of food to help them get through the month.
This isn't like months.
It helped a lot of people.
Hard digging. This is fairly easy stuff.
Right, so when you're dealing with people that, they're not working and they don't have a home and it's just not a matter of we just got to get through the week or the month or whatever it is, things are tight.
However, that being the case,
right, when it's people that are homeless,
state police is controlled.
They don't have a place to go, druggies, whatever it is. That's why we have the programs, right?
Because the governor's going to choose a state police commissioner and then all the way down. Let's share about that because, whether we're talking about some of the activity that you made mention.
Right, because if someone were to come up and not just say, hey, I just got to get through the week, like, I don't have a place to go, I'm homeless.
Forgive me. Osmond there.
I'm just walking around on the street. I don't have a home.
That Steve Robinson has done.
Oh my goodness! And how the Chinese Communist Party is involved in all this. I mean, there's so much stuff where Mainers like myself.
Well, you can't just go passing out free houses to anybody that walks up and says,
we were talking
I have no home.
I had the opportunity to
be people would start doing that left and right.
Kathy McInerney was coming to your event next weekend, and she brought me on to talk about Maine.
Well, we might be able to get you some low-income housing if you want to go on our medication and state protocols.
Of rural Maine.
No.
And the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, and the marijuana.
I know. As you notice, those people don't get housing. They get pushed out of the systems and blackballed by the fucking pill-popping psychotic pieces of shit. This was being recognized back 2006, 7, 8, so you can try to say, nah, it's crazy, conspiracy. You motherfucking nasty hags. Shut your fucking nasty slut traps.
We know what's going on. We know it's all there, but we've been told to stand down. How is that acceptable in Maine?
So if I'm a legal immigrant, I've been granted U.S. citizenship, but now you're committing felonies. Mm-hmm. John, you've been doing this a long time. Help me or someone who's listening who doesn't know how this all works out. When you
I know, right? It's insane. It's actually insane when you really think about it.
Can you then lose citizenship because of that?
That's a tricky one, and I think you're seeing that even right now in Minnesota. I think common sense to all of us says yes, citizenship is the ultimate gift. It's the ultimate reward.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of it's all whatever. It's already done. Can't really do too much, and those people they're not breaking the law.
Brother,
right. It's morally wrong. It's fucked up, and you depend on people in the systems to not do a lot of those things. Yeah, they seem to not do what they should and be doing a lot of things they shouldn't, and that's sick and disgusting and disturbing, all for the sake of whatever little vengeance game, Trump hate.
I honestly think that
it's fucking sick, and you can see it over here. Even Trump was like, what's going on in Maine? All this transgender bullshit with Mills and what we've been telling you. Think about it.
Established that way.
Yeah.
Everybody had a fair and equal chance.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of those kind of like the ones we're listening to on there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure like a lot of those have that general idea and get the gist of it. Just like anybody else. Like, okay, so should we talk about daisies or right? Because as you can see, to talk about it for what it is,
there's a transcendent belief system.
They are scared of it, as though it's the plague, it's conspiracy, and if they even listen to it. They're falling for something.
How that's changing.
Yeah, it's insane. It's stupid. It's immature and it's nasty. And we really hope the proper authorities here in Augusta, Maine, do what they're supposed to do to report the facts.
We have to talk about Islam. We have to talk about what's coming in. And when we talk about the open border policy, because we
as you can see, we tried to prevent it from being mean. See if they had accepted the truth.
There is a legitimate problem.
We wouldn't be being mean to them.
Conservative numbers.
It's not mean.
7 to 8.
It's only mean if you're one of the sickos protecting the sickos or committing the fraud. You think it's mean. We're exposing you and telling you you're a nasty fucking piece of shit. And we hope you feel the pain and torture these kids have felt tenfold.
A lot of them came as far north as Maine.
We talked
we're just brainstorming some ideas.
Experience. I was a housing commissioner in Massachusetts, which then led me to run some migrant hotels in Massachusetts, where most of the people in these shelters were either from Haiti or Venezuela. And you get to know them. You're around them 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Why did you come here? Well, you're told at the border to go to the blue states. Go to Massachusetts, go to Maine, they have the best benefits. Mm-hmm. And so when Massachusetts got overrun with just, it's just like a sponge, the water's running down and the sponge eventually, can't hold water anymore, the overflow. So when Massachusetts got immediately filled up, and it literally was overnight, 30,000, Haitians and Venezuelan people were dropped into the state, literally at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you had to figure it out. But the overflow then came up to Maine, because Maine has just as good, if not better, benefits, because Massachusetts doesn't have general assistance like Maine does.
Right.
They do have EBT and they have fraud, SNAP benefits and so forth. But Maine actually has better benefits. So the people are told at the border.
Yeah.
Head north.
Yeah.
Head north. Go to the blue states. Don't stay in Texas.
Isn't that shocking? So vacation land, Maine. The way life should be, and yet people are coming with very sinister plans and motivations. Let's talk again about the triad marijuana. Mm-hmm. Are the majority of, as your investigative journalism, have you guys concluded that the majority of those who are involved in this are legal or illegal Chinese immigrants? Or is it a mixture of both?
It's a mixture of both, because it is our belief that a lot of this is trafficking, human trafficking, and that a lot of these people working in these triad wheat houses are actually slaves. The people who are running these take away their passports and
say,
gosh. Hey, listen, you're going to be here. You're going to stay inside.
It was playing some kind of stuff that was corny, so I was like, Alexa, play some funny stand-up comedy. And this is what she gave me. Oh.
And that happened 2 years ago. I've been thinking about it for 2 years, and I cannot think of a worse idea than turning the police force into Uber. You're like, hey, I'm here to investigate. It looks like a armed robbery. Reported by Miranda. Okay, cool. Yeah, just hop on in the back. I'm Aiden. This is my partner, Bladen. Yeah, there's some bottled water. There's a place for you to charge your phone if you need to. Right now, it looks like you selected Uber Poolies. So we're gonna take you downtown, but we're gonna have to like pick up 3 more criminals. Also, we don't make a whole lot of money at Uber Poolies, so we're actually moonlighting for Postmates too. So we're gonna need to run this Ethiopian food up to some people up there. Don't forget to leave a 5-star rating for Aiden and Bladen. The internet is going to be in all our stuff now. Do you know about the Internet of Things? The Internet of Things. All of your home appliances are going to be on the internet. Which now all the stuff in your house is going to be like a little bit more vain and a little bit more racist. You know what I mean? The Internet of Things. You're going to get up for breakfast and be like, hey hon, I was going to make you breakfast except that like the fridge just keeps retweeting Bernie Sanders stuff and the stove is all in for Bloomberg. Right? Can't get them to agree on anything, right?
Propaganda was the word you learned about Nazi Germany or the communist red in Russia. But let's talk about propaganda for a moment, because if you can impact people's thinking, that'll impact policy, and then it'll impact culture. So, when we saw just a few months ago, where much of the mainstream media here in Maine was revving up so much hatred and vitriol towards the good guys who were coming in to try and crack down on this illegal. So whether we're talking about the illegal marijuana grows, human trafficking, drug trafficking, healthcare scandal, you would think, and most Mainers, if you ask them, don't you want these things to be extradited from our communities? Don't you want these things dealt with? But mainstream media was revving up that, no, the real bad guys are the ICE agents. So you're in media, you're a journalist. You know there's a great onus and responsibility on you to take the truth and to broadcast it. Like you said, there's your story, there's my story, and then there's the truth. Mm-hmm. But sadly, we're not seeing that in mainstream media. And we're seeing the effects of how now you walk into a restaurant with a giant sign, ICE agents not allowed. Like, how did our state get there?
I think I will tell you, triad weed is the biggest problem in Maine.
Yeah.
Followed very closely by fraud. But even maybe parallel on that flow chart even is the media just being disingenuous with people here in Maine. You've got the Portland Press Herald, owned by George Soros. So tell me that that's balanced media.
Right.
Like, it has an agenda. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I'm fine with agenda media. I am. I work for a conservative, type of media. Like, I believe that there needs to be balance. So if the Portland Press Herald was the only, liberal, and then maybe the Maine Wire balances out, I actually think you get then good information. But you look at the second biggest part in Maine, the Bangor Daily News, yes. And you go, why did Janet Mills give them $2.4 million of your tax money to write nice things about her? Mm-hmm. Is that fair? Is that fair and balanced?
Doesn't seem it.
Doesn't fair. Like, I'll write a fair article about somebody, and you don't I won't take your money, and you don't have to pay me, because my job is to report, and that's the big difference. Like, I'm a reporter. You say something, I write it down. It happened at this place at this time, and he said this. That's what I do. That's what my job is. I'm not really paid for an opinion piece. Sometimes I do write some opinion pieces, but 90% of my job is to report, and nobody's ever questioned my reporting. Some people have disagreed with some of the editorials I've written, but nobody can question my reporting because I take it very, very seriously. You don't see that in Maine here. Maine protects this. Like, we're just outside of Portland. You get off 295 and you drive off. You get off on Forest Ave and you go by the post office and
I was just there today.
You make the left onto Preble Street.
Just there.
You tell me that that's the country that that we want. You've got homelessness. You've got open air drug use.
Needles litter the sidewalk. It's like a zombie. In the middle of the day at lunchtime, I'm walking through and it's just heartbreaking.
It's a 2-minute drive to City Hall.
Right.
How can that be?
Right.
How can that be?
Yeah.
And John, you're evil. You're picking on these people. I'm not picking on these people. I'm picking on the leaders in City Hall.
Well, listen, let's try to connect some dots here, because we're sitting here in the pastor's office podcast, and maybe someone for the last 10 or 15 minutes they've tuned in like, well, this sounds awful political. This doesn't sound spiritual.
Right.
No, and thus is the problem, because we have to connect the dots. It is vitally important for men and women to have a worldview. I'm appealing to the Christian man or woman who has a biblical worldview. And if we have a biblical worldview and we realize that the Bible actually addresses immigration, it addresses identity, including sexual, gender, government, and this is what the whole hope of this podcast and these episodes are to do, is how can we connect the dots? We're talking about something that, may be cultural, may be political, but ultimately these are biblical issues. And, I began by using that verse out of the law of God. I'm going to read it one more time. Leviticus 19, verse 33. Do not take advantage of the foreigner who lives amongst you. It reminds, God does, that you once yourself were foreigners. We want the nation of America to be a city on a hill, a glorious light where people would come and enjoy a high standard of living because of Judeo-Christian values. However, if you're not an immigrant, but instead you're an invader, and you've come in illegally, or you've come in with sinister motives, we believe that needs to be dealt with. And so Christians, we must not fall for the media's attempt to try and ostracize or criminalize the ICE agent, which has been, it's been shocking for me to see how easily people fall for some of the most social justice falsifying narratives that the media puts out there. I'm amazed to see how sometimes Christians don't know how to answer, well, what do we make of ICE agents? Oh, they're grabbing children and moms, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Immigration is a biblical concept. God is the one who gives us the detail. You taught in the beginning of this podcast, you said you have given much of your life to help people. You've given much of your life to help people who are immigrants. Mm-hmm. But you've also, now you're giving your life to exposing when those who are causing harm to people, who are ripping off the system. What you made mention, John, that one of the greatest threats here in the state of Maine is the triad illegal marijuana grow. Well, if I'm watching and I'm thinking, okay, you painted a little bit of a dark horizon here for the state of Maine, whether it's the mosques that are expanding and maybe sex trafficking, or the home health care, or the marijuana grow by the illegal triad, organized crime.
Oh, good question.
What would be your...
I was waiting for that one. Someone just asked, why would illegal grow operations be so prevalent in a state where it's legal? Yeah, because they're not selling it here. They're selling it in the states where it's still illegal. Good question.
Expectation to a Mainer. What would be your expectation as someone who
Right, so hence, too, when you think about that and what we've been talking about, and these traveling bans and how they lace it, and they set people up, it's a whole other channel and network of setting people up. This was brought up back in 2008. In fact, Dr. Phil had it on his show. Yeah, only, he didn't get into the dangerous people doing that kind of stuff. He was mentioning salvia. And this is being sold at head shops. Remember salvia? It was being sold as an incense. Very powerful stuff. Probably one of the most powerful psychedelics in the world. Right. So anyways, Dr. Phil had that on his show. So again, when you have the illegal grow operations going and selling to the states where it's illegal, you're probably going to notice more freakouts happening in those states where marijuana is not illegal and they're selling a lot of that stuff. Or, right, well, that's why when you have dispensaries, everything is licensed, and then they're buying also, if they either have their own grow operations that are regulated, or they're buying from licensed growers. Hence the importance of that. So when you start to see it and line up kind of the years and the things happening with what we were just talking about, Right, so can you see how the education about that and just teaching people how scary it is? It's been so scary to a lot of us. Back in 2008, 9, and 10, that's why many were, disclosure and telling people the truth, because it's exhausting, it's sad. Like, people shouldn't have to be out here arguing with psychotic, over-medicated druggies, psychotic pieces of shit that take their religious, cultural, and personal beliefs to a level that's fucking sick. And they're expecting our systems and law enforcement and others to teach people lessons and arrest them for defamation and offending their religious beliefs. Shut the fuck up. Holy shit. Or keep yapping. It's America. You have a right to do that. And I have a right to say what I just said. You got a fucking problem with it, then you're doing exactly what you have a problem with, motherfucker. Anyways.
Who's hearing this 1 hour podcast.
What'd I say?
Maybe they have children and grandchildren. And they're thinking, goodness, I don't want that warning of Deuteronomy 28 verse 43 to come to fruition. I don't want to see the Maine that we grew up change quickly. What would be your exhortation to that person?
I've always believed that all politics is local. You've got to pay attention to what's going on in your backyard.
Yes.
You've got to, and there's always going to be varying degrees of, conflict, and I believe conflict is good, because I think it builds a better result, but you've got to be aware of what's going on in your kid's school, because what's going on in schools isn't like my age, like schools are different than for me, even probably for your generation. You got to be aware of what's going on in your schools. You got to be aware of what's going on in your local city halls, and you have to be aware of what's going on in Augusta. Now, you don't have to follow it, constantly, but you've got to be aware, because things aren't what they expect to be. Since COVID and the demise of local news and local newspapers, people don't know what's going on. Local newspapers don't exist anymore.
Right.
Even major television stations, they're all bought up by, a few companies. There's no more local news anymore. It's all driven with a national narrative. People just kind of have to pay attention. And I think it's wonderful that today's youth are finding faith too. Like my generation, no, not so much. But I think it's wonderful that the youth are, coming back to God, coming back and asking questions.
Yes.
And stuff. It gives me hope for the future. It gives me hope that, we can start turning some of this stuff around. Because if we don't, the next generation is going to be the first generation in American history that's not going to have a better life than what their parents or their grandparents had. And that's the fall of a great, society. And I pray that doesn't happen.
As do I, John. One of the last episode we released was on TPUSA Faith, Turning Point Organization. Of course, Charlie Kirk, who took a bullet for his faith and for standing up for truth. We became not long after, as a church here at Calvary Chapel, a TPUSA Faith chapter. And really, it's doing what you just said. It is taking, how does our faith go into the culture? And really equipping men and women. It's been a privilege in just the 6 months that we've been at TPUSA Faith chapter. We've had a handful of people, including my father, who have decided to step up and to enter into the Senate race or the House of Representative race to say, I want to take my Christian beliefs and impact policy, including and especially immigration. So, John, I suspect we could go on for a long time. We got to have you back, and there's other issues that we want to have you kind of speak into, because you're a great asset. And it's been a privilege to watch as the Maine Wire, Steve Robinson, and certainly you yourself, John, you guys are putting Maine on the national map and saying, hey, listen, this beautiful state is quickly but surely changing, and not for the better. And so we are making an appeal, and certainly here at the pastor's office, making an appeal for people to say, hey, it's time to wake up. It's time to take what we know to be truth, to take our transcendent biblical values and bring them out into the culture. So, John Featherston, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor to join you.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Listen, the next episode, we strongly encourage you guys, as we just took on the topic of immigration, next week we're going to look at the topic of Islam. This is something that John and I were just discussing.
This
it is very
my
connected.
How
does Islam
so cute.
seek to pose a threat to not just the nation here of America, but even more specifically, the state of Maine? So we thank you. We're grateful that you would join in to the pastor's office And subscribe. Let people know what's happening, that the biblical
question.
truths we want to bring out into the social media square. Grace and peace to you.
They're headed your way, Hathaway.
And also with you.
It's about to be a head-on battle.
All right, we are seeing Elon.
And there are no adverts. Blink